continue if you want. I just want to make sure that no one thinks that we're keeping information from them. So go
I
ahead.
just got the message for the live stream. And
Yeah.
hello, Roberta. So yeah, we went to the selectmen's meeting the other night, me and my wife, and I told them about what was going on, and the selectman was sympathetic to what was going on, and the town manager said there's like nothing they could do. But they did write a letter to, they had the code enforcement write a letter to Prentice and Carlisle, or maybe Tom Doak. He didn't actually say who he's going to send it to, and it doesn't say in the letter who, it just says to whom it may concern. And it says, I am writing to inform you that the town of Searsport has received a complaint about damage done to the discontinued portion of Cobb Road. As that portion of the Cobb Road is no longer in service, it is not the town's Searsport's responsibility to repair damage caused by use of a public right-of-way. The position of this office is that it would be in the best of your interest to repair the damage caused by your logging operation before any litigation occurs. In specific, the drainage culverts that were crossed should be replaced one for one, and the road surface should be brought back to usable condition. As in its current condition, it is a significant hazard not only for the residents of Cobb Road, but also to emergency personnel who may be called upon to respond to the area. Your cooperation in this matter is greatly appreciated. So,
Yeah, you can share that with the commissioners too if you want. But generally it's like 5 to 10 minutes, and then they spend about 5 minutes asking questions. So
yeah, I can read it to them, you mean, like, and then see what they say?
if you want to, yeah. I mean, I think I might first just start out with who you are, what town you're in, and your story of what happened. And Roberta, did you want to see if you can share your screen with the pictures?
Yeah, let's see if I go, I've got to go full screen, I think, so that I can get at the share screen. Share screen, there it is.
Let's see if it lets you do it. And it did last time, so fingers crossed. Yeah, it looks like it'll let us share your screen. So that's good if you want to show the pictures. Perfect. You guys can all see that.
I can see it, yeah.
Perfect.
Else is here.
It works.
Awesome. I was hoping they fixed that issue. I guess they did. So yay.
Good. One thing I can't figure out is that it no longer lets me easily toggle back and forth to full screen.
Did you hit escape? Hit escape, and it should minimize the screen.
Nope.
No.
What I've got is thumbnails of the three of you plus one other person who's not on video.
Yeah, that's Kim. She's from my office in case I get bumped off, that the meeting will continue to run. So I made her a co-host so that the meeting will continue to live stream and run if I get booted off and have to use my cell phone, because it would be my personal account rather than the state account. So I'm covering all my bases here.
Okay.
Huh.
I had you on full screen and now I can't seem to get back to it.
Technology is so great, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you have that little square at the top, Roberta, or no?
Well, now I don't even have that. I tried clicking on the hide thumbnail video to see if it would give me the full screen, but it doesn't. And now if I click on Zoom, it doesn't bring it back.
What if you stop sharing?
Well, I can try that. Stop share. Ah, there you are. Okay.
All right. I think if I remember correctly, when I share, I can't see the people behind the screen. Everything gets minimized. So when you want to see people, you have to hit stop.
Okay.
You know, sharing, and that should work. So that will be good. All right. So let's see here. I thought I saw John just get on, but maybe he jumped back off. Okay. All right, so we should be all set. So the meeting should start in about 8 minutes or so, I think, once
Okay.
everybody gets on. Was there anything else you wanted to test, Roberta, if it worked or not before we?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna mute myself in the video. I got a couple things to do, and I'll be back in a minute.
Okay, I think I may do likewise.
All right. Thanks, Roberta.
Back.
Hi, Steve.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing?
Good. How's Northern Maine treating you?
Beautiful day here.
Mhm.
Everything's perfect.
Awesome. Hi, Carla.
Hello.
Hi, Jim.
Good afternoon. How are we?
Excellent.
Great. It's a beautiful day out there. I hate to keep us all inside on Zoom, but a necessary evil. It's 1 o'clock. Let's go a minute more. Make sure we get everybody on board who's going to join us. Okay, let's get underway. Let's call this August 8, 2024 meeting of the Abandoned and Discontinued Roads Commission to order. Heather, can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Carla.
Here.
Peter. Absent. Rebecca.
I am here. I'm transitioning back to the office from another meeting.
Joe Higgins. Okay. Jim.
Here.
Chris.
Here.
Vivian is absent today. John.
Here.
And Roberta.
Here.
Ryan.
Here.
Steve.
Here.
Kathy. Absent. Okay.
All right. First off, we have some draft minutes for the June 18th meeting. Have we all had a chance to review those? Any changes? Anyone want to make a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion to approve the July 18th meeting.
Thank you, John. Second?
Here.
Thanks, Steve. All in favor? We'll have to do the roll call vote. Sorry.
Sorry, guys. Carla.
Yes.
Peter's absent. Rebecca.
Yes.
Joe is absent. Jim.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Vivian is absent. John.
Yes.
Roberta.
Yes.
Ryan.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
And Kathy is absent.
Hi, Vivian.
Oh,
Heather,
she's here.
She has just arrived, so let's let the attendance reflect that
Yes.
Vivian is here with us.
All right.
Hey,
Excellent.
thanks.
Thank you. Typically, we've put on our agenda public comment, and it didn't get on this agenda. I apologize. I suppose we could think of that as being other business and announcements. We have a member of the public, as I understand it, Mr. Talgo, who would like to speak with us. Is that correct, Roberta?
Yes,
Okay.
and I have some pictures that he sent me that I can share.
Okay. What I'd suggest is, rather than keep Mr. Talgo waiting till the very end, look, if we could move up public comment as other business and announcements to now in the agenda, and Mr. Talgo can speak with us, and then we can let him go about his business, unless he wants to continue to watch us. That's his call. But do we have a motion to move public comment, other business and announcements up to item 4 on the agenda?
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second,
Got it. All in favor? Let's just do a hand vote on this one, guys. Anyone against that? Okay. Then, Mr. Talgo, please let us know what you have to say.
Hello, my name is Aaron Talgo. I currently reside in Searsport. I have property on the Old Cobb Road in Searsport, 236 Cobb Road. Recently, Swom decided they was going to cut their property in behind my property. It's on an abandoned town road. And they decided to use my portion of the Cobb Road to access their woodlot. I spoke to the woodcutters. It was Prentice and Carlisle is going to be doing the wood cutting, and they told me when they first pulled in that they would maintain the road, fix anything if it got damaged, and maybe even fix the road up even better than it was before they started. From day one, they broke 2 culverts and really made a mess of the road, and I complained from day one to Prentice and Carlisle, and they told me that after they got started on the roadway there, they told me that they couldn't put any money into the roadway because they weren't going to make any money off the woodlot. They was doing it as a favor to Swom. They actually haven't started cutting. They just brought in a bunch of gravel. Like, I don't know how many loads. I wasn't there to see them all, but they brought in loads of gravel to fix their portion of the Cobb Road, which is behind me. And in so doing, they've messed up my road. So I recently, the other night, went to a selectmen's meeting to town and asked them if they could help, and they gave me a letter that they sent through the code enforcement is going to send to Prentice and Carlisle, asking them to fix the road, but Searsport doesn't have any responsibility to repair the damage. So I guess that's it.
All right. Anything else you care to add to that?
did you want to share the letter, or
I can read it to you, yeah, if you guys like to hear it.
Is it a long letter?
Not real long.
Okay, if you care to read it read it to us, that'd be fine.
It says date August 6, 2024, from the Office of Code Enforcement, Town of Searsport. It says, to whom it may concern, I am writing to inform you that the Town of Searsport has received a complaint about damage done to the discontinued portion of the Cobb Road. As that portion of the Cobb Road is no longer in service, it is not the Town of Searsport's responsibility to repair damage caused by use of a public right-of-way. The position of the office is that it would be in the best interest you to repair the damage caused by your logging operation before any litigation occurs. In specific, the drainage culverts that were crushed should be replaced 1 for 1, and the road surface should be brought back to usable condition as in its current condition. It is a significant hazard not only to the residents of the Cobb Road, but also to emergency personnel who may be called upon to respond in the area. Your cooperation in this matter is greatly appreciated. Victor Mazza, Code Enforcement.
Well, thank you. Just so, Mr. Talgo, so you can appreciate what we're charged with doing. We have heard from landowners throughout the state about various road problems. We're not a court, we're not an administrative body, we can't fix these. What we've been asked by the legislature to do is to, where we see some issues with regard to abandoned and discontinued roads, where there may be some legislative fixes for everybody's benefit, to make some comments to them to suggest legislation. And so we're hearing from you and other landowners. It's not a formal hearing. We appreciate your comments today, though. And if you'd like to send along a copy of the letter, and I understand there are photographs that you forwarded that Roberta has, if you'd like to send those to us, it's something that we'll consider as we continue to look at the problems of abandoned and discontinued roads throughout the state. So thank you for your comments today. Roberta?
Thank you.
Yes, the reason I asked him to come today because I know that you folks like to pick on me as an example, and I am okay with that, and I appreciate that you always say that you're just picking on me as an example. But I like to remind you every so often that I'm not the only one. In the last 9 weeks, I've gotten 12 or 13 new complaints, and that's not counting the ongoing ones that I'm still working with. But let me show you the pictures that he sent me. I believe I can share my screen here. It'll let me do this. Share.
You're better at this than I. There you go.
Well, I'm beginning to learn. It's taken me a while. This may not look really bad at the moment compared to some of the others we've seen, but if you look at it, the road surface is depressed below the ground to each side, which means that when it rains, the water is going to have no place to go except down the road. And if it's level, it's going to sit there and just turn the road into soup. And if it's not level, where there's a hill, it's going to run down the hill and wash it out. You can see it's already pretty puddly, and you can see where just the weight of the trucks has depressed the surface. I want to go back. There's one here that shows the crushed end of the culvert. This culvert isn't going to be able to take large capacity rain now because it's crushed down. It's going to restrict the opening. And when the opening to a culvert is restricted like this, it means that any trash that gets washed down is going to plug it pretty quickly. And then even though there still is room in the culvert, the water can't get into the culvert, and it ends up backing up and washing over the road. And that's where we often see culverts getting washed out.
Okay, thank you.
I ask a question?
Please.
Was this a town road that was discontinued?
Yes, discontinued or abandoned. I think abandoned.
Abandoned?
That means it's still a public easement.
There is a public easement?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Talgo? All right, again, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. And you're free to remain watching the meeting or not. That's entirely up to you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so back then to our regular agenda. The next portion is a presentation from the Public Use Subcommittee. As you all recall, we've formed a couple of subcommittees. There's Subcommittee 1 and Subcommittee 2. Subcommittee 1 is looking at public use, and that's what the legislature has asked us to look at for this in this session. To take a look at examples of public use, why people are making public use of abandoned and discontinued roads, what some of the issues are in that, and then if there are negative consequences, how do we minimize those? So that is something that Group 1 has been looking at. You'll find minutes of those meetings. The Public Use Subcommittee has met twice. That's July 9 and July 25th. And we looked at a potential way to try to provide for repair of these public easements, or prevent them from being further damaged. As you just saw pictures of what can happen when there are ruts in a road, water can collect, water can undermine the road, it can freeze and thaw and cause further consequences. There can be erosion. There are a number of bad things that can happen when roads are used at a time of year that's inappropriate, either because of the truck weight or because of just any vehicular activity causing problems on those roads. There are several statutes that deal with trying to keep roads in decent shape. But the one that we're probably many of us are familiar with is the municipalities are able to adopt a policy, an order, an ordinance that will prevent use by heavy vehicles. We call it posting roads. And it usually happens in the spring because that's usually the problem. The thaw causes the roads to become a little softer and you can damage them by having heavy weights on those gravel roads. And so we often see posting done by the municipalities, and we see the orange postings, which are similar to those that the Maine Department of Transportation uses. Same type of form. And Pete's talked to us about those, and we've all seen these. But it's not clear whether a municipality's authority to post a public way to temporary use, whether it's spring thaw or it's rains in the fall, whether that extends to public easements. That's because the definition that's used in public ways in Title 29A, it isn't clear whether it includes public easements. So what we have as a committee discussed is the idea of making an addition to that statute that authorizes posting ways seasonally or temporarily to specifically call out that this can be done for public easements. And it doesn't matter in our formulation whether the municipality maintains that public easement. Because remember, if there's a public easement, the municipality has the right but not the obligation to maintain it. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. That should be irrelevant because there may be people such as Mr. Talgo, as well as Roberta Manter, fixing the public easement. And their work also should be protected from this type of use. So this idea here is that the municipality can post that way, that public easement, regardless whether it maintains it, in order to protect the integrity of the road. That can be done temporarily. It may be seasonal, whatever is appropriate for the municipality. And that's what we've prepared a draft bill to do. This is something that I believe that we had a unanimous consensus of the Public Use Committee to recommend that to this board, to this body, the commission. So if anyone from the committee would like to add to that description, please go right ahead. I couldn't have done
One
that.
thing I would add, one thing that I would add is that those pictures that you just saw were just taken in the last several days. So this isn't just a spring and fall mud season problem necessarily. There could be other times of the year when a road needs to be protected. And that may depend on the weather that particular year. If we've had a wet year, then the posting might have to last longer.
But that's something that each town can determine by, being able to see right on the ground what the status is. Any other thoughts or comments? Rebecca.
I think that's clarity is always great. But I would point out that there are real limitations on what can be posted, what trucks can operate on those facilities. So municipalities are limited in what they can prevent from being on those roads. And I don't know that necessarily it will deal with all the traffic that's doing on hazards, but that's just an expectation that we should be aware of.
Right. If the municipality goes on truck weights, which is what many do, I think DOT's rule, as I looked at it, was 23,000 pounds.
Yep.
And then you have to also allow the fuel trucks in no matter what. And there's also home heating fuel, organic animal bedding material that has to be allowed to come through. But there are some exceptions. You could even, the municipality might limit vehicular access to just residents who abut that road. That's a little more than what DOT limits, but that's something that perhaps a municipality can work from. But it still would have to allow those vehicles that state law requires to be allowed through. And what we might do is work with MMA and Maine Local Road Center to try to come up with some sample policies that would follow state law, but try to provide some guidance and some limitations for municipalities to adopt.
Yeah, Jim, let me add in here that I was on vacation for most of July, so I just read all this stuff this morning. So my first impression of changing 2395 is a good thing. It looks like that makes sense to add public easements in. From a practical perspective, the orange signs that say heavy load limited say pursuant to 29A 2395. So that printing issue would not exist. I'm just wondering, how a town, there's a lot of towns, it's difficult to enforce the orange signs.
Right.
And I'm not sure if there would be the level of I'm not so, when you post a regular town road, that's a big deal because you're investing a lot of public funds in there to keep it in good shape. If you've got a road that you've discontinued and you left a public easement and the town has never had anything to do with it for years, and now they're able to put up heavy load limited signs, is there going to be as much motivation on an enforcement level to even care about that? That may be an issue, but I think in the long run, this is probably a good thing because there's a lot of people who do pay attention to the orange signs, whereas other truckers don't really care at all. But I think for the most part, there's more positive than there is negative here.
I think it's a first step, and I think part of it is going to be educating road commissioners, select boards, what this means, and to take it seriously.
Yeah, and the other thing is that, MMA's had their longstanding model ordinance,
right,
and that would have to be updated to include this option. And a town could even keep the same rules it has now for public ways, but they could do whatever they wanted to do for limits on public easements that turn to mud, like Roberta just showed.
right.
If you want to keep it just vehicles, you could do that. I mean, the rules are fully open to be tweaked as much as you need them to be.
And that's something we can work with MMA on. Roberta, you have your hand up. I have to step away for one moment. I'll be right back.
Yes, I wanted to kind of give an example of what Peter said is the difficulty of enforcement. And this happened years ago. Hopefully things have improved somewhat since then, but I don't know whether they have or not. But we had a situation where there was a logging operation going on between us and the entry to the road. And we were concerned because they were parking out in the road, which blocked us being able to get out. And for the whole time that they were loading their truck, and they weren't particularly anxious to move the truck so that we could get out. They wanted to finish their load before moving it. But more than that, they were hauling when the road was still soft in early spring. And we complained about it, and they kind of poo-pooed it, and we don't have to listen to you, sort of a thing. So we said, well, if we catch you here again when the road is thawed, we're going to report it. And so we did catch them again, and we called the forget whether it's the sheriff or the state police. They alternate their duties in our area. One takes 1 week, and then they swap off for the next week. And so we called the officers, and they sent somebody out, but by the time he arrived, the truck had left. And he said, yes, he had actually seen the truck going down the road in Wayne. We're in Fayette, and he'd gone over the line from Fayette into Wayne. He'd seen him going down the road, and he could see the muddy tire tracks pulling out onto the pavement. It was obvious the road was not frozen, or he wouldn't have left all that mud. But he said because he couldn't be sure that that was the same truck, there was nothing he could do about it. We pretty much have to have the truck still be there when he arrived in order for him to be able to enforce it. So a few days later, the truck was there again. And that time I was headed out with my car, couldn't get past him. So I zoomed back into the house again, and we called and zoomed back out again. And at that point, the truck was still there. We couldn't get around him to park a truck in front of him to block him or to hold him there that way. So we just informed him that the police were coming and would he please wait? And we stood in front of the truck. And he calmly finished loading up his load. And when he was done loading it, he got in the truck, started up, put it in gear, and started driving with us standing in front of him. And so my husband climbed up on the bumper of the truck and reached down a hand and pulled me up on the bumper of the truck too. And we were slamming our fist on the hood and saying, please stop, please stop. And he just kept going at about 5 miles per hour, up onto the pavement, down the road, around the corner, down to a friend's house, pulled in around behind the friend's house where he could hide the truck. And so we ran over to a neighbor's and called again and said, this is where he is now. And they told us that we shouldn't have done that. Well, yeah, we probably shouldn't have. It was kind of a spur of the moment panic. How do we stop him? How do we keep him here until the police arrive, kind of a thing. The newspaper reported that we had ridden on the bumper of his truck for over an hour. Well, he went maybe a mile at 5 miles per hour. That was no hour that we were on the bumper of his truck. But we were ridiculed because of what we had done, and nothing really got done about it. He was taken to task for it. He got a slap on the wrist. Basically, he was told, don't do it again. But by then he was pretty much done hauling anyway, so we got nowhere really.
There really aren't a lot of good answers to otherwise police these public easements. When we talked about it, yeah, there are.
Excuse me for interjecting. What about like a phone photograph that's got metadata? If she saw this person doing that, wouldn't a cell phone photograph of the person ruining the road, wouldn't that suffice? Or like a game cam, wouldn't that suffice if you got, the perpetrator, caught doing it, and you got like geospatial and temporal information on the photograph?
At the time, we didn't have those capabilities. That was before everybody had cell phones. So I said this was some years ago.
You probably had a shoulder-mounted camcorder with a VHS tape available.
We didn't have that either.
The other thing I will kind of just suggest too, I mean, we deal with this a lot with other types of recreational vehicles and stuff. And typically, like, you have to have a conviction before you can get restitution for damages and stuff. So we may be able to catch them, but it's out of our hands once it gets into the court system. And if they don't convict them, it's hard to get restitution for damages.
Right. I mean, there is an ability for someone who's an owner of property abutting this abandoned or discontinued road to bring a civil action in Superior Court, but you have to prove your case in order to get your damages. So that's one statute. It's there, and you can even get attorney's fees and costs if you're the prevailing party, but unless you have the evidence, you can make the case. And if this stuff happens while you're asleep, while you're at work, while you're not in your house, all bets are off. You really can't recover the damages because you can't prove the case. There's a provision which makes it a Class E crime for creating damage or destruction to a public easement by operating a motor vehicle. But again, who's going to know? Usually, you know it's happened because you see the tracks, you see the result, you don't see it actually happening, and law enforcement doesn't catch it happening. So there are vehicles, so to speak, to try to go after people, but they're really not effective. That's why we focused on this idea of the posting as being at least something that would catch, if we could convince municipalities that they can do this and should do this for public easements, even if they don't maintain them, then at least it's something that would prevent or make someone think twice before taking that oversized vehicle, that truck down, that ATV, whatever, down that road at that time of year.
That's where I've suggested the possibility of posting signs saying, warning, it's a Class E crime to damage a public easement with a motor vehicle. Maybe at least make people think.
Well, if you could get Ace Hardware to start carrying those signs, maybe people will pick them up and put them at the beginning of their public easement. I don't, but no, I understand it. It's something to show that there's a gravity.
Would it be legal for me to order a bunch from a sign maker and make them available to people?
Oh, I'm not going to give that legal opinion over there. But I think certainly you can talk to towns as to whether they'd be willing to put a sign like that up at the beginning of a public easement, particularly if it's one that, you know, where the town is maintaining. It certainly you can ask. Do we want to add here that municipalities? Well, let's take that for another piece of legislation and not attach that here. But maybe that's something to think about when we talk about public easements more generally. So that was what the subcommittee group 1 came up with, and that's the recommendation, and that's the draft legislation. Is everyone okay with that before we go take any votes? Any thoughts, comments, suggestions?
So Jim, just so I'm clear, the 2 meetings, July 9 and July 25, was discussion about all of this right here, and the ultimate product was the suggestion of changing 2395, right?
That's correct.
Right.
Okay. I'm good with that.
Just a comment from me. I was really impressed with the work, and thank you very much to the subcommittee.
The committee did a great job coalescing around this and you know, looking at the options and coming up with the language. Is there a do we want to wait and put our legislative package together later, or is there do you want to make a motion now to include this in whatever package we forward to state and local government? Want to do that now while it's fresh in our minds?
I'd do it now. I'd make a move to do that now. Might as well knock things off as we go if we've got good agreement on it.
Okay, Steve's motion, second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Pete's second. This one, definite roll call vote. Please, Heather?
Carla,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Rebecca.
Saw that hand go up, Rebecca. Go ahead.
Well, I kind of just wanted to ask Carla what her feelings were about that, particularly when there's a public easement on logging operations and a commitment if the town posts that.
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of what you were saying.
So do you foresee a conflict if there is a public easement in which there are logging operations and some sort of commitment from those logging operations to maintain that space? Do you foresee an issue if the town
If it is posted?
posts it? Because I can see there being a conflict between people who live on those roads not wanting those trucks coming down, but the operations wanting to go down. And
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's potential for conflict there, but a reputable logger is not going to be logging under those conditions, and they shouldn't be anyway. So I suppose there's conflict, but it's probably going to be with the outliers.
because the logger companies are the ones that go after the posting powers the most, and pretty voraciously, as Pete can attest to.
Yeah, in fact, now that you say that, Rebecca, I'm thinking of a certain person that was behind this move to change the posted road thing a couple of years ago. And he represents all of the professional loggers in the state that haul the pulp truck guys and gals. And if they hear about this and know that we're going to expand the posting to public easements, we may hear from them, because the bottom line is they don't like posting.
Already exists in my interpretation. Well, I'll just put that out there. But I think, we'll run into the same issues that we ran into last time, which is when we're restating what courts have already interpreted existing powers to be, there's a perception of mission creep.
Yeah.
Well,
there's always people out there that don't want any buffers on any water bodies too. You know what I mean? There's still good best management practices. To me, this makes sense.
I think what we've heard is that Carla's group would not oppose this because it makes for responsible use of the roads by everyone, including logging operations. And if there are some who want to challenge that, that's fine. We can't necessarily deliver unanimity to state and local government. We can say that our commission is unanimous. We can't guarantee that there are other people out there who might not agree, and that's just the way it is.
And I honestly, I think that's what's most important about those decisions, that we're not going to have commission members split off. Like, we as a commission can agree to this if we're going to put it forward, because there is going to be splintering amongst some of the similar members, I think, on the.
So with that, Rebecca, your vote?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Okay, Joe's absent. Jim?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Vivian?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Roberta?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Kathy is absent, so motion carries unanimously.
Great. Thank you all. That's a good start.
As a comment, Kyler, is this an event that you're familiar with? And do you think things are stretched on that particular Mr. Talgo's event?
Honestly, it was news to me. I haven't heard anything about it, so I didn't want to respond here until I get more information about it. So it's completely new to me.
And we heard about this comment last week, and we've been accepting comments from the public, and so that's why it was on, not to surprise anybody or whatever. Just he asked to be on, and we accept that public comment all throughout this. So
just a quick question to that, Jim and Roberta. Were there any before pictures, just out of curiosity?
He told me that he does have before pictures, because when he first saw they were going to be coming in, before they'd done that damage, he ran out and took a bunch of pictures. He has not sent those to me. I will see if I can get him to send them, but he was having a little bit of trouble with the technology, and said that he wasn't sure if he could remember again how it was that he sent them the first time, which is why I shared them rather than having him share them.
The only reason I ask is it looked to me in the photos, it's like they're putting top gravel down over the top of what was existing there, and they're just running over the top gravel. So it almost looks like they hadn't finished what they were doing yet. That's why I was curious.
That's fair.
My understanding is they haven't put any top gravel on his section of the road. They've put gravel onto their section, but not onto his section.
Additionally, I'd be curious to know that wasn't called out cleanly about bonding and logging exemptions in this particular situation, because that did come up in our committee of discussion of what are you going to do if these situations happen.
And I also don't know what Maine Woodland's position is on it. It sounded like he was doing the job as a favor to them. He said he wasn't making any money on it. So I don't know whether their intention was to do something about the road separately from him. I don't have that information yet, and I'm kind of waiting to see what kind of an answer he gets back to that letter.
Well, I think it would be good to see the before, as well as we've seen the after photos, the before photos in the letter from the code officer, just to complete the comments that he made to us. With that, though, let's talk about Group 2, the Limited Liability Subcommittee. And many of the same people were on that same committee, but that's okay. It's we met once on July 18th. You have the minutes, the draft minutes, and you also have the product that came out of that. The concern here is if someone who lives on one of these roads has to maintain the road, repair it, maintain it, put the culvert in, replace the culvert, put on the gravel, do the grading, in order to make it passable, because the town has decided it doesn't want to do that, which it has the absolute right to decide not to do. What happens if Jim is driving down that road and I hit a pothole and I get whiplash and I lose my right tire or whatever. I have a claim for property damage, for personal injury. I could sue the person who did the work on that road, the abutting landowner. Is that fair where there's a right of public access that at least allows the abutter to be able to go up and down the road, and the abutter isn't a government, but it is basically trying to keep the road passable for the general public to use? Should that person be liable? And so that's where we started. And we started talking about that in repairs and maintenance, and basically if you in good faith conduct repairs and maintenance on the road and you don't create any dangerous situation, then you are generally going to be held free of any liability. But what happens if the town might even maintain it? Someone drives down the road and gets hurt and then sues not only the town, which they're not going to get much recovery from, if any, because of the Maine Tort Claims Act, but then sues all the abutters. The abutters haven't done anything on that road except suffer the public right of access. Do we want to keep the abutters free from liability in that instance? And a couple of committee members raised that. So we start out talking about liability for when a landowner does work because the town isn't. But then there's a question of, and I've never seen anyone make that claim before, but a claim for liability because you own property abutting a public way and I got injured on it. And so what you see in front of you is a proposed new Title 14, Section 159E that contemplates both. So it's a limitation of liability, not just for personal injury or property damage stemming from repairs or maintenance that you might make on the road as an abutter, but also simply the public's use of that public access. Now, I'll add, at our last commission meeting, there was a discussion about why are we even creating a new statute? Why don't we just stick with the existing Section 159A, which talks about a limitation of liability for public lands and roads? And the answer is that that statute was limiting liability for injury with public use for recreational purposes. People aren't using these roads for recreational purposes. People are using them for access, either to their own properties or to their logging properties or to their houses or to their businesses, or they're going to visit friends and drop off goods. It is a public way. It's different than recreational use that Section 159A is limiting liability on. Roberta?
I would add also that there are people who are using the road who have no particular reason for being on the road. They're just using it as a shortcut to get to somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Chris, you had your hand up? Okay. So that's the reason why the committee went with this separate Section 159E instead of trying to make changes to 159A. It really is a different source of liability that we're trying to protect from. Does that make sense? Okay. So if for those who have had a chance to look at this proposed 159E, a public easement is defined in Title 23. Remember, there are two sections that define what a public easement is, and that's its own little nuance, but we'll deal with that another time. Public easement is defined in Title 23 in those two sections. The idea is that, the definition of repairs and maintenance is very similar to, if not identical, to the repair and maintenance definition under the private ways and private roads statute, under which road associations can be formed.
Jim, I'm wondering if that definition needs some, a little editing because it does refer to, calling a meeting in accordance with subsection 2. It looks like maybe we just copied it.
Yes.
And so I don't think that would be required in this. I'm sorry, I didn't catch it
Nope.
before.
That's okay.
I agree that I think that definition needs a little tweaking.
Yep.
Another part that's in there that I think may not be relevant is the bit about paving, because most of these roads we're concerned with don't have any pavement whatsoever. I don't know if it's necessary to take that out entirely, but something we want to look at anyway.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we simply say repairs and maintenance includes but is not limited to snow plowing, snow removal, sanding, ice control, grading, adding gravel and surface materials, installing reclaimed asphalt or grinding existing pavement for reuse, installing, cleaning, and replacing colors. You know, everything gets at the end. And maybe that's what we're talking about here. It's truncated. And that's the problem when you borrow definitions from other laws.
One thing I remember reading in the Maine's legislative drafting manual is that sometimes it's better not to be too specific. And the example that they gave was something about that it's unlawful to uproot, cut down, trim, transplant, mangle, destroy, and there's this whole list of things that you must not do to any tree, brush, shrub, plant, wildflower. And I read it and I said, why don't you just say don't hurt the plants? And their summation was that what you should say is don't harm the vegetation. So, because if you get too specific, then if you leave out one thing, then people can say, oh, but that's an exception. That's not in there. Therefore, it doesn't count. So
Well,
if you can kind of make it in general terms, sometimes you're better off.
if we say includes but is not limited to, at least we know it's without limitation. So, but these are the broad characteristics of or classes of what we would call repairs and maintenance. If we've missed any obvious ones, then let's get them in there. But okay. So the idea is let's and that helps shorten the definition, which is nice too. The critical part here is the limited liability sub 2. An owner, lessee, or occupant of property. So if you own the lot or the house, if you're leasing the property for a woodlot, or you're leasing it as a house, or you're leasing it for industrial purposes, or even as a farm, or occupant. You may not own it, you may not be a tenant, but you're the occupant of that property. Abutting a public easement or portion thereof is not liable for personal injury, property damage, or death caused by that party's conduct of repairs and maintenance on that public easement in order for that owner, lessee, or occupant to access their property over the public easement from a public way, or B, by public use of that public easement. So that covers both potential sources of liability. I think somebody on the subcommittee asked, has anybody even sued anyone for property damage or personal injury caused by a person's maintenance of that road? And I'm not aware of it. I don't know if others have seen instances of that. Pete, maybe you have?
Yeah, I was wondering if it should say anything about maintenance or lack thereof to indicate that the abutting landowner has no duty of care for that road.
Well, we could do that, and we also have a section 4. Nothing in this section creates a duty of care or ground of liability for injury to a person or property to keep the public easement safe for public access use to persons entering the public easement for that purpose. So that's part of it. But I hear what you're saying, and that's it's easy enough to say or lack thereof in 2. Limitations, and this is important because it's not if you create a cliff or for people to fall off of or something, or a giant pit to try to trap them, or whatever, that all bets are off. This section does not, in 3, does not limit any liability that may otherwise exist for a willful or malicious creation of or failure to guard or warn against a dangerous condition on the public easement reasonably known to the owner, lessee, or occupant of property abutting a public easement. Do we want to include the or failure to guard or warn against? Or is that something that really should be the town's responsibility if it's a public easement retained by the town?
But if they're not maintaining it, they're not going to be driving up there anyway.
Yeah.
I read that as if a culvert washes out or half washes out and there's a foot deep trench across the road, someone should put up a sign or put something up there, cones, to warn people against that. So I think failure to guard or warn against is a good thing to put in there.
Except that it has to be something that they're aware of, because, for example, the road could wash out above us, and we never use that part of the road, so we'd have no idea that that had happened.
That's why it says reasonably known to the owner.
Okay. So I was going to say there are also situations where maybe a hill between us and the main road gets slippery, has ice on it or whatever, but we haven't been out in 3 days, so we don't know about it.
Yes, and the other thing might be reasonably known, and like if you had a situation like in a bunch of the country now where you have like in a crazy amount of rain runoff, and there's everything, you can't reasonably be expected to be on top of everything if it's like catastrophic.
Let's keep going, but those are some of the concerns. So no duty created. On 5, landowner liability for environmental damage by others. There are sections in the environmental statutes in Title 38 and also in Title 12 with regard to the UT. And what these do is basically say that if you're performing repair and maintenance activities on the road, or if you're doing work, and someone damages that, you're not liable if you can provide substantial credible evidence that the violation was committed by someone else, and you also aren't subject to penalties or fines for a violation. But what can happen is that the owner can get tagged for that and then has the right to go after the violator. I made this a little different so that the owner gets off the hook no matter what, because you may not be able to go after that. You may not ever be able to find a violator for the same reason that you can't go for civil damages under that section of Title 38 that we talked about. So there are protections here, whether the legislature will go along with that or whether DEP will go along with that, because this is a little different. It doesn't say we're going to get the money from the owner and then the owner can go after the violator. And so DEP might not be happy with that piece, but it seems reasonable to us, since it's pretty hard to find that person who committed the violation on these public easements, particularly where the town isn't maintaining them. And no one has, you don't have the police presence or control. Steve?
Well, and the other thing is sometimes, like when people like driving on muddy roads in the spring with their pickup truck, sometimes they don't like going alone. There might be 2 or 3 or 4 trucks all together. You know,
a whole convoy of them. So that's what's done there. So it protects the owner. It protects the owner more than the statutes in the UT and in the standard environmental sections now, which may cause some friction later, but it's to the benefit of the property owner, so it's a place to start. Just beware there could be pushback. And the idea here is that the court shall award any direct legal costs, including reasonable attorney's fees, to an owner or lessee or occupant of land abutting that public easement if that person's found not to be liable for injury or property damage. So if the suit is brought, you've got this limitation of liability, and if you're found not liable, then the court shall award legal costs. So there's it isn't a may, as you find in so many statutes, including some of the municipal code violation ones. It isn't a may or could, it's shall. So that I think is helpful in these instances. So is that, what do we think as a group of that, on that those changes? I note the change for 1B to repairs and maintenance, and the or lack thereof in 2 for limited liability. Is that something that we all agree to? Anyone object to that? Why don't I try one more draft on this before we take a vote on it, so that way you have it to look at, think about, and then we can see if we can add that to the package. So we've talked about the public use piece, we've talked about limited liability. What should be the next issue that gets taken up? What else would we like to try?
I'd still like to take a look at that possibility of minimum maintenance. There needs to be some way to say that if the public is still going to keep use of a road, then the public has some responsibility for providing enough maintenance to support the use that they're bringing in on it. Because you cannot constitutionally force private landowners to maintain a public road for the public's use.
Now, to be fair, Roberta and I have differing opinions on that last statement, but I think, respectfully disagree, but agree to keep talking. And so on this idea of minimum maintenance roads, how would that work with regard to existing roads? We have existing public easements now and existing discontinued and abandoned roads. Would this be prospective? Would this happen from this point forward, that we'd have this new category of roads, Roberta? How would this work?
Well, we tried to narrow it down as much as possible so that we wouldn't be opening up a huge can of worms that nobody would accept. If there is a situation where maybe there's an old farm out on the road that nobody has used for years, and somebody moves back into it, and the town is going to say, oh, but they're half a mile out the road. We don't want to have to build that road up again for them. But the problem is that when that person makes that piece of road passable, then the public will start using it, because it's like we joke that Main Roadway's motto is build a better public easement and the road will beat the pathway to your door. So if the town is going to, say, issue building permits, if they're going to tax that property now as being a residence instead of a piece of raw land with nobody living on it, if the town by its actions is basically saying the public is now welcome to use this road now that it's opened up, then shouldn't there be some public responsibility for the consequences?
And the same could happen if someone were to say, gee, that's a great place for me to put my auto body shop. I'm going to put a new commercial or industrial use out there, or whatever. Same sort of situation. I could apply to the municipality to have this public easement reclassified as a minimum maintenance road. Is that what we're talking about?
Well, that's a little different, because then they're going to be the people who are bringing the major traffic in. That business is bringing the traffic in. If the town has permitted them to have a business in there that's going to produce a lot of traffic, then that's something to take into consideration. But what we're mainly concerned with is where a person needs a road just for access for their own passenger cars to their residence, and the public is welcoming in a whole lot of other traffic that makes major wear and tear on the road beyond what that person needs. Why should that person have to build a road that will support all those other uses when all they need is something that would support the traffic to their residents?
So as a construct, would the person who is looking to build the residence or get the building permit or to renovate an abandoned farmhouse or whatever, the person who's going to put a residence on this public easement apply to the town to have that road reclassified as a minimum maintenance road? Is that, I'm trying to just think about how this happens procedurally and who has what authority. You'd have that as something that you'd go to town meeting and there'd be an article as to whether to make the public easement to Roberta's house a minimum maintenance road.
I'll have to give that one a little bit of thought.
Does that sound like something that we want to send to the Public Use Committee to talk about for the next meeting?
I would agree that's almost a case per case basis, not a general fits everybody mold.
But if you created the classification at law saying, we have townways, we have public easements, and maybe in between is a minimum maintenance road, and it's something that the municipality could lay out or could it accept a road as being, I don't know, I'm throwing this out. But that's what I'm thinking of. Right now you have townway, public easement, private road. Private road where town can't spend money, it's unconstitutional. Public easement where a town can but doesn't have to maintain it, and a townway where there's a legal obligation to maintain it.
So are you saying then the minimum maintenance road would be the town would have a legal obligation to provide a certain level of maintenance?
Right. So it would be in between the public easement and the townway.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in favor of kicking that to the committee, the subcommittee. Not every public easement is the same, so.
It would be case by case. It's a classification of road if a town wanted to go down that road, so to speak.
Yeah. My question is what exists or what doesn't exist in current laws to allow that to happen? Because that's what happens all the time.
I'm sorry?
Municipalities do take over those public easements and turn them into accepted roads as people move in to locations. They're constantly changing over.
Occasionally where towns get deeds and are from the landowners and where the landowners are willing to build it to spec and turn it over to the town, it's usually a high bar. I'm not being dismissive. It's
a good reason, because there needs to be some sort of uniform width, etc., to accommodate existing materials. But there's also a caveat emptor piece in there. So if we're making certain that people know what they're buying and willingly do that, then at some level, that's on them. But the other side of that is the town does have the authority already in existing law to help to add material to those roads, to help maintain them, and to also turn that back into a public road.
A couple of comments on that. One is I would love to see a poll done of towns to find out, and I think Ryan did some of the work on this, but it'd be good to have a poll to find out how many towns actually do maintain any of their public easements and to what extent, and what they require in order to decide which ones they're going to do that for. And also to find out how many towns actually will re-accept a road and what their requirements are for that. Because again, as Jim said, most of the towns that I know of, the only way they will possibly accept a road is if it's first brought up to town standard. And that's prohibitively expensive for the landowners. And that's part of the point with this, is that it costs a lot to bring a road up to full town road standard. But not every road has to be to that standard. Why can't we have something in between? So that, for example, where a town is considering discontinuing a road that currently they are maintaining to town standard, but it's getting to be more of a burden than they feel it's worth, should they have only two choices, either keep maintaining it to full town road standard at great expense or stop doing everything entirely? Shouldn't there be something in between where they can say, okay, it's not necessary for us to keep it to this standard. We can let it be a gravel road. We can, if the pavement goes bad, we can grind it up and just leave it as a gravel road from then on. Can we take some of these roads that haven't been paved yet, and instead of saying, well, we've got to bring them up to town standard, say, well, we're not going to discontinue it, but we're just going to keep it passable for the landowners who need it. We think there should be some more options for towns that would actually save them money in the long run, because they won't have to keep them up to full town road standard. So that was part of our objective in the first place. The other thing is that, as someone said, not every public easement is the same. There are plenty of public easements where nobody lives. Nobody wants it brought up to anything better than it is now. And then there are a few that have maybe a house or two houses. And if you made them passable, maybe more houses would move in and you get more tax revenue. And that's what has in fact happened on some of these roads already, but at the expense of the landowners who are maintaining it for themselves. And we don't think that's right. If a town wants to make more tax revenue off of a road, then let them put something into it so that it will support that use.
Yeah, I don't think there's any revenue coming off of roads for towns. I think you can look at any town budget and see that's not the case. But that aside, the town standard is established because of safety and court required standards. So we would have to create some sort of passable category that would exempt them from their current obligations that have been court interpreted.
Right, that's what we're saying, is there should be a lesser standard. It doesn't have to be, so many inches of pavement on top of so many inches of substrate. It could be just a good gravel road or even just a passable road. Most of the people who live on these discontinued roads would be thrilled if the town would just come in and dump a load of gravel in the worst mud hole once in a while. At least that would be something. It's some step in the right direction. It'd be an improvement over what we've got now. But to say that, well, we're just going to say towns aren't liable and then let the road become a total mud hole, and yet the public is welcome to use it. Where's the liability in that? The towns are excused from all liability and leave the road dangerous, and that's not right either.
The idea is this is something that we've seen an example from New York State of, and the argument is that if a municipality retains a public easement in a road and therefore is able to pay less in damages for discontinuing the road, then maybe it should be made to do some maintenance to that road. You could also make the argument that that public easement is something that actually benefits everybody, because otherwise they wouldn't have any access to their lot and it would be landlocked. But the idea is maybe by creating this limited liability road, there would be an opportunity for a level of maintenance greater than the dump a load of gravel on it once every couple of years, without getting to the safe and convenient for public passage by motor vehicle, which we see for subdivision roads and for townways generally, where you have the requirements of paving and subbase and all of that. Maybe there's something in the middle. If there's some appetite just to discuss it and see if there's something that maybe makes sense, that's something the Public Use Committee can take a look at. I've heard a couple of folks say that they would like to do that. You want to make a motion as to whether to send this to public use, or do you just want to do this by consensus?
I think it would be great for them to do that. So I'll make that motion. But I think also, as you're looking at the New York, you should look at how they fund their roads and the taxation powers. So though, if we're going to do apples to apples, that's how you do it, because you'll find that those minimum maintenance roads have greater funding opportunities than the local property taxpayer.
Well, one of the things that we had looked at was where you have a road that has nobody living on it. Each of those properties is taxed at a value of maybe $1,000 an acre, maybe a whole lot less than that because they're in tree growth. the tax revenue that the town is getting off of those properties is pretty small. But as soon as the house goes in, then they're able to tax it for a residential property. And the amount of taxes that they get off it more than doubles, triples, it goes way up. And we've had, other people on our road that tell us how much they're paying for taxes for their houses that are, pretty comfortable houses, not like our little hole in the wall. But what they're paying for taxes, if you took even a fraction of that increase in tax revenue and put it back into the road, that's a step in the right direction. And that does show that the town is getting more tax revenue off of these properties. So they should be able to do something for the road.
Well, we have a constitutional requirement to tax properties at the highest and greatest value, which is why tree growth exists, because otherwise it would all be developed. And that's why it's held to a lower standard and why the taxation is lower. But there's also a lot of penalties to pulling property out of tax growth, tree growth. So you don't.
And then there are also folks who, might have lakefront properties or whatever, and they're seasonal dwellers and are on these camp roads, and they say, well, I'm getting nothing for I'm not sending kids to school, I'm only here seasonally, I get nothing gets done to my roads, why am I paying these exorbitant taxes? The arguments go round and round. But let's take a look at the issue, and I think it's fair to say, where's the revenue going to come from? And we'll see where that goes. Rebecca brought up an interesting point as she went along, in which had to do with the idea of taxation and of fairness, and of looking at the issue of what types of relief we should be giving, and disclosure being a huge issue. People go out and they build in these areas. There's a disclosure law with regard to roads, but it isn't working particularly effectively. Pete's talked about the map viewer tool, which tells you whether roads are publicly maintained. It doesn't tell you whether they are townways, whether they are public easements or whatever, but at least lets you know a little bit about the level of maintenance. Maybe the disclosure portion that Rebecca mentioned, the map viewer that Pete talked about, we did come up with some sample legislative ideas last time around about changing the existing real estate disclosure laws. Maybe is that something we could be looking at and suggesting as a way to try to head off some of these confrontations so that people make more informed purchases about their real estate? Is that something that's worth looking at?
Yes, I can tell you when the real estate disclosure laws first went through, the complaints that I had been getting, I'd been getting a fair number of complaints from people saying, I've bought a piece of land and now I find out the road is discontinued. What does that mean? And after that law went through, I stopped getting so many calls like that. I was more likely to get complaints saying, I'm looking at a piece of property. They tell me the road is discontinued. What does that mean? And that's a whole lot better. It's a huge improvement because people knew what they're getting into. And this is an argument we've heard over and over again that, we don't owe you anything because you knew what you bought when you bought it. And often that was not true until that disclosure law went through. What we've seen after that is that there are still private sales where the seller doesn't know about the disclosure or doesn't feel obligated to make full disclosure, so people still don't know. And another problem on top of that is that they may disclose what it is, but not explain what that means. So they can say, oh, this road is a public easement. And everybody sees the term public and thinks, oh, that means it's a publicly maintained road. And there needs to be something explaining that, no, the public easement does not necessarily mean that it's maintained by the public. This is what it can mean. And then just a few years later, they passed Title 23, Section 3121, which is the law that was intended to assure lenders that a piece of residential property that they were financing was going to remain passable. And so basically what it said was that if there is no road association or road maintenance agreement of any kind, then it's assumed that all the property owners share equally in the maintenance. And we've seen massive problems with this one. I know of at least 4 or 5 cases where the title insurance company has gotten stuck trying to scramble to get the person access. In some cases, it's because that law shouldn't have been applied to it because it was not a private road at all. It was either a road that was discontinued without any easement whatever, and there is no access, or it's a road that was discontinued with a public easement, and none of the property owners wants to contribute to maintenance because then they're going to be maintaining the road for the public's use, and they don't want to do that. There are also cases where somebody tries to carry through on it. They bought the property, they decide to do some road work, they have some gravel hauled in, and they send a bill to the other landowners splitting up the cost. And the other landowners say, what? This is the first we heard about it. We had no idea there was any road agreement. We never agreed to that. We have no intention of putting any money into the road. And the person has already bought the gravel and isn't going to get any payback unless he takes them to court. And no guarantee that he will win. So Section 3121 has been a nightmare as far as main roadways is concerned. We've just seen too many complaints on it. I wish we could put the genie back in the bottle somehow.
Well, where did that law come from? I mean, I know the legislature passed it, but who proposed it? What was the problem?
It came from the real estate community and from the lenders. I would like to get input from the title insurance companies and see how they feel about it, because they're getting stuck with the bill when it goes wrong.
Is that something we want to address? Or, well, it's really kind of beyond our job description, because we're looking at abandoned and discontinued roads, not existing roads like that.
The problem is that it's getting applied to abandoned and discontinued roads, and it shouldn't be. And maybe there needs to be something put into the law that says specifically that it can't be used for those. As a matter of fact, the Maine Alliance for Road Associations has been trying to work on it, and they've been around and around and around on it, trying to find solutions that don't cause more problems. I think they're close to having some suggested wording for it. I don't entirely agree with their wording, which is a problem because I'm a member of the board and we don't want to put in a split decision again. There was some talk of maybe putting in 2 versions, their version and my version, and I don't know how that would go over either. But I can ask the Zamara board if they'd be willing or ready to share their proposed drafts with this committee.
Couldn't hurt for us to look at it at least. We may not think we need to weigh in, but we see it. Getting back to the issue though of disclosure, do we see that there are problems or weaknesses in the existing disclosure law that with regard to abandoned and discontinued roads, and do we want to explore some ideas on how to fix that?
So Jim, just to confirm here, this disclosure law says that if you're buying a house, the realtor, one of the things they have to check off is the status of the road, right?
Right. And many times it is unknown because it's unknown. But if they turn to your map viewer, they might find that it is or is not publicly maintained. That might not answer the question of, is it a town way, is it a public easement, is it a private road, but at least someone would know whether it's publicly maintained before making a purchase.
Right, but I think the greater benefit here would be to let the Maine Realtors Association know there are resources like the map viewer that they can go look at instead of just putting unknown. I've said this before, but my young nephew is a realtor and a very aggressive one. And until I told him about map viewer, he would spend hours. And in the end, on trying to find, who maintains the road, he didn't know where to look. He kept looking and looking and looking. And I asked him one day, and I said, well, let me show you something, Patrick. And he said, wow, this is incredible. This is going to save me hours and hours. So is there something that we could do as a commission or somehow let the Maine Realtors Association know that things like map viewer actually exist?
Can certainly communicate.
To me, that would be a huge benefit.
Yes,
What about a checkbox that said, have you checked main map viewer before
Yeah.
you move forward or something?
Yeah, I would love to have whichever of us are appropriate, do a training session with the Maine Realtors Association and offer it to their people that we can show you where to find this information and show you how it applies to these different types of roads.
Yeah, DOT used to have a guy that would do presentations to Maria on driveway entrances, but that was before MapViewer. So, and he's retired now, so I don't know if anyone does it anymore.
So is this a problem that requires legislative fix, or is it better to informally, as a commission, just send a note to Marita, to Maine Realtors, and just say, hey, there's this disclosure provision in state law. Some people don't know how to address it or whatever. We're just telling you there's this map viewer tool that Maine DOT has, and you may want to think about that. Maybe take that step first.
Yeah, so you're not looking to immediately make a requirement for them to check the status with the map viewer?
Right.
That'd be ideal. That'd be perfect. If all the transactions would require it, it'd be nice.
But if we inform them that the tool is out there first and see if that helps the situation out, and then if there's still problems with it, we can suggest legislative fixes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jim, I have attorneys calling me that are working on cases. They want to know the status of a road. And once I tell them at the end of the conversation, by the way, you could do this yourself. There's this thing called MapViewer. Let me send you the link. And I never hear from them again because they use it.
I'm going to start referring people to you, but anyway. no, that's great.
Need to figure out how to get the Maine Local Road Center to pop up higher in the Google analytics for roads.
I think the disclosure shouldn't be about what is the status of the road. I think because it's going to be too difficult to find some of these. I think it should be a simple yes, no question. Is this road maintained year-round by a public entity, town, city, or state? Yes or no?
Or seasonally.
Yeah, or seasonally. And if it's a yes, then it's somewhat. If it's a no, it doesn't matter if it's a public easement or discontinued or abandoned. It's not maintained. And then buyer beware. They know at that point that what they're buying is not maintained. It shouldn't be someone else's responsibility to find out the access to a property.
So basically the question is yes, no, is the road maintained by a governmental entity? And then if it's yes, seasonal or year-round? Check one. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, when they were doing the work on that bill, the original proposal was that it would say that they needed to disclose if it was a private road. And I said, no, don't say if it's a private road. Say, is it maintained by the public or not? And they did that. That's what it says in the disclosure law is if the road is not maintained by the public, then list who does maintain it if known. So that's already in there. But the problem is that when you come to this other law, the section 3121, they weren't as clear on that, and therefore it's getting roads pulled into it that shouldn't be.
Imagine if it said, is this a private way?
Or a public easement.
Yeah. All right. So do we want to pursue the idea of clarifying that along Ryan's suggestion? And at the same time, notifying the realtors that this tool exists?
I think we start by sending a letter to the realtors to let them know, because the disclosure thing is already in place.
Right.
Okay. All right. I think we can draft up a letter. Heather, we'll put that on our to-do list for the next commission meeting. I'll have a draft letter that the commission can look at, and then we can decide whether to send that. We can take a motion at that point on that when you have a draft letter in front of you.
Are you looking to tell them both about the viewer and propose that we, ask them what they think about a question like that about maintenance, like Ryan suggested in the same letter.
I think the temperature in the room online is that we start with the letter and hold off on legislative changes. Maybe for this session. Let's take a look at the letter and see how we feel. But for today, it sounds like not so much make a legislative change, but let's just get a letter out there. At least let the realtors know, and Maine Real Estate Development Association too. Let's let Marita know.
I guess what I was asking is, are you posing both those things to them?
No, we're talking about letting them know about Map Viewer at this time.
Just the Map Viewer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Jim, we got off on this disclosure thing when we were talking about minimal maintenance.
Right.
Just thinking about this. A town goes, there's a reason why a town goes through a discontinuance process, and they go through it, and eventually the purpose is to get rid of the maintenance of the road. Probably in most cases, because most towns don't go through a discontinuance process and continue to maintain the road.
Right. The idea is to get out of the business of maintaining that road, period.
So now we're saying, okay, we're going to discontinue it, but we're still going to have money in the budget to do some sort of minimal maintenance on it. And then I can see that can go wild, because what's minimal maintenance? Everyone's going to argue what that is. If it's a gravel road and it turns to mud, well, you should throw some gravel out here. Okay, we already did. They didn't do a half decent job. They threw 2 inches out there and it's still mud. Well, we did minimally what we were supposed to do. Well, we filled a pothole, then the rest of the road falls apart. I can see all kinds of arguments between people living on the road, driving on the road, and those that are doing the minimal maintenance. Huge disagreements on what minimal means. I know, Roberti, it's all about making it somewhat passable so it's reasonable to drive up the road. But man, I don't even know if you could define what minimal maintenance means.
Well, New York has tried to. There's a statute, and we'll share that in advance of the Group 1 meeting.
Okay.
And you can at least see what's there and react to it and see if it's something worth pursuing. So that will be Group 1. Now that we're done with public use, Group 1 can take a look at minimum maintenance. We'll have a letter to come back to the next meeting of the commission. That'll go out to realtors and Marita talking about Map Viewer. So let them know that that's something they can at least think about and looking at when they're doing their disclosures. And then what else? What other things do we want to pursue at this time?
Suggestion, could that letter also take a quick look at section 3121 and at least caution them that they shouldn't assume that a road is a private road just because it's not publicly maintained, and they need to look into whether maybe it's a discontinued road or something other than a private road?
I think we can say that DOT's Map Viewer tool talks about whether it's publicly maintained, but does not address the legal status of the road, and just leave it at that. Whether it's a townway, public easement, discontinued, or abandoned, we can, I think, make that statement. But it is a question as to whether it's publicly maintained, which is probably of interest to their customers, their clients. Anything else that we need to put on for subcommittee review so that we can get moving? We had been asked to look at all those terms: public easement, public use, private road, private way, see if we could make some sense out of all of that. And the legislature kind of did a little bit of what we wanted. They kind of messed it up a little bit by continuing to use the term private way instead of public easement as we'd asked. Do we want to take another run at cleaning that piece up?
What's going to be the turnover in the next session with the people we've been dealing with versus new? Rebecca, do you know that? Is it all new legislature? Is it half, or how's that work?
Well, a lot of the current folks that are on that committee are running again. So they are, whether or not they'll win the race, we'll find out.
Right.
Okay.
But they are largely all running again with a couple of exceptions.
Now, whether they all become part of the state and local government committee next time around, I mean, many of them will return if they're reelected, but there will be some turnover. So there will be some educational component of what we have to do when we go back and meet with them in January, February, with any legislation we've proposed. We will have a report due in February, so that's something that Heather and I can start writing, and we'll, with any luck, we'll be able to add to it as we make our decisions on proposals here for legislative changes. So, all right. Does anyone else? I haven't meant to monopolize. Pete, you have something?
So if the terms is still unresolved and we've still got issues there, it appears that we still have, there's a lot of value in trying to finally straighten that out. And if that's the case, we should focus on that. To me, there's a lot of bang for the buck there, I think.
I've begun trying to take a look at whether we could do a dictionary style definition where it says that, for example, a public easement may mean any of these things, and which definition applies depends on the context. Because as Rebecca has pointed out, a public easement can mean all kinds of things. Our public roads are public easements. Utility lines are public easements. There are sewer lines. There are conservation easements. So saying that something is a public easement is confusing to begin with. But if we have a dictionary definition that says a public easement may mean that, a general easement held for the public for any public purpose, or a public easement may mean a road that was formerly known as a private way, or, set out each of the things that each of those terms could mean. It's complicated.
It might be difficult for anyone to try to figure out from context what it's supposed to mean in that particular context. So I don't know if we're creating more problems than we're solving like that. But why don't we do this? How about if we assign group 2, since the limited liability piece is pretty much done, we'll just refine it and bring it back for a vote next time. Terms, and start looking and figure where we want to start at looking at the terms issue again. So minimum maintenance goes to group 1, which has been doing public use, and terms would go to group 2, which has been doing limited liability.
I'm wondering if maybe there would be different people interested in those topics. We don't want to necessarily assume that the people who signed up for one topic are interested in a different topic. And maybe people who weren't interested in those topics who would be interested in these topics.
Good point.
Didn't we have a terms committee before?
We did.
I was on that.
Why don't we do that? We'll call it group 3. We'll call it terms. We're going to assume that minimum maintenance and public use are the same characters, but group 3 would be terms. Who wants to be on that committee? Pete?
Okay, I will.
I'm volunteering you. Okay, Roberta, Pete, who else?
What are we looking for a timeline? I would, but I don't want to commit to something that I'm not going to be able to make the meetings for.
Well, it would certainly be something where it would be helpful to have you start out on at least, so we can get going on that. Carla, did you have your hand raised?
I did.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Roberta, Pete, Rebecca, Carla, anyone I missed? Okay, great. And I guess to serve as a liaison, I'll work with that committee as well. So what we should do then is, when do you want to meet next as a commission? Maybe late third week in September? Give us time to get back from our summer vacations and whatever, to get back to work.
That's when my summer vacation will be happening because
You're not allowed one, I'm
that
sorry.
vacation.
Same here. I'm out from, well, I guess the third week, the 15th, I guess I could do, but I'm gone the 21st or the 30th.
Okay. How about the week of the 23rd? Oh, you're gone through the 30th. Okay.
You don't want to just do a doodle poll, Jim, and see what the collective.
We'll do doodle polls. What I'd like to do is this. Let's set up a time, late September, early October, for a commission meeting. Maybe it's the first week of October, it sounds like, although that's going to interfere with MMA's convention, so I whatever. But maybe that first week of October, we have a commission meeting. Between now and then, let's try to have one of the committee meetings, the group one, which will be looking at the minimum maintenance roads, and we'll get a copy of the New York law out there for people to look at as an example of what Roberta's talking about. And then group three, we'll be talking about terms and see if there are some things that we can focus on to try to clarify. I think the lesson learned from the last session of the legislature is let's take little bites to see what we can do to make this better, and make sure we have unanimity or at least strong consensus going into those little bites so that we can try to make improvements. It's going to be gradual, it's going to be incremental, but if we keep it going, we'll get there eventually. Now, I've been talking way too much. Any comments, thoughts, suggestions from any group member, any commission members?
Jim, let me just say, because Roberta is probably going to ask me, the list we were going to put on the website with the inventory for every town, all public and private roads. The lady that's been working on this has pretty much got it done, but then I found out the DOT is in the process of redoing its website, and it still may be a month or two, who knows? So they didn't want to put up anything new in there until we do the new version. So it's still going to be a little while, but anybody that wants that list, I can give it to you and print the spreadsheet off. It's just, I can't put it on the website yet because they don't want to put it on the old one when they're going to turn around and redo everything and put it on the new one.
Pete, what format is the list on? Because I'm wondering if I can't put it just on our website for people to click on temporarily for the next couple of months, and then I can change it over to the link to you guys so it constantly updates. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's in our internal
Okay.
Computer system here, the warehouse, so to speak, the data warehouse. That's not accessible to the public. So
okay.
Any given town, I can give you a spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what eventually is going to show up on the website is PDFs.
Okay.
But I can't, it's the dashboard, and I just, that's not available to anyone outside the department.
Okay, understood. I just thought I'd check.
Do you want to encourage municipal officials or anyone looking for that spreadsheet to get in touch with you in the meantime to get a copy?
Sure.
We could put that on our website.
I'm thinking of several years ago when there was proposed legislation to try to get towns to do inventories. And one of the legislators asked you, Pete, whether it would be a problem for the DOT if all 400 some odd towns asked you for that information at the same time. And you said, no, it wouldn't be. So I'm going to ask you a similar question. What if the Maine Alliance for Road Associations asked you for all of the town's information at once? Would that be a boondoggle?
Right now it would be, because I'm the one that's going to do it, and I don't have time to do that.
Okay.
When this gets ready, it should be a matter of a month or two or three before these will all be a click away on a website as a PDF.
Okay, I will tell them to be patient. Thank you.
Yeah, so if individuals want to get a hold of me for one here and there, sure, no problem. Take me 2 minutes to do.
Right. But a major download is not something that would be helpful at this point.
No.
So, right. Other comments, thoughts, suggestions? Going once, going twice. Thank you all for your time this afternoon. Appreciate it, for your input, for your thoughts. And we'll be back again early October as a commission. We'll have a couple of group meetings in between. And again, thank you very much. Heather, thanks for your help in facilitating all of this.
Thank you, Heather. for your
Motion to adjourn as a formality.
Yeah, so moved.
Okay, I saw Roberta's hand as a second. All in favor? Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
And a nice August.
Thank you.
Thank you.